good. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Nice to see you. Thank you for joining us.
See you. Yes, I'm so excited to be a part of your call today. It's nice to be away from my nephews right now. I'm on family vacation.
Oh, you're on vacation. Thank you so
Mm-hmm.
much for taking the time out. We
Of
appreciate it.
course, of course. Yeah, my friend is getting married in the Cape Cod, Massachusetts, if you know where
Right.
that is. And
Right. Okay. Yeah.
yeah, so I'm here for the week. I'm a bridesmaid, so I have to be here for a good amount.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just figured I could still work. I have my whole remote set up with me and everything. So, trying to go business as always.
Yeah. Nice. Because you've just been teaching just before this call, haven't you?
Yes, sir. Yeah, I have a couple of students, production students, voice students. Um, depending on what they're looking for, and helps me with my artist project. It helps me pay for stuff. So.
So there's a lot of multitasking involved for you, I imagine, with your career as an artist, your career as a musician, your career as an educator. Are you having to
Yeah.
sort of all these worlds together?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, it's tough because if you really think about it, my violin career and my artist career are really two separate entities, and they don't really overlap. In the sense that yes, like accomplishments and such can, help one or the other, but I think the difference is you're not really using the same skill set in any of these little spaces. So, when I do a gig, whether it's like a performing gig or a recording gig, I'm not using the same like thinking hat as I am for like maybe.
Oh, I'm sorry, we just missed your audio there. Maybe was there a call that came in or
Yeah,
hello, are you there? I think we've lost your audio. Good.
do
There we
not
go.
disturb my phone, so no one had to bother me. Okay.
You're saying something
But
really
yeah, they're
interesting and
very different. So it's almost
no, go on.
my bad. So I was saying they're very different. So it's almost like having a full-time job that is in music but has nothing to do with my artist project. So it's a lot of balancing, and it's hard to keep up with, everything, being a human being, being a dog mom, being a recording artist, being a violinist. It's a lot. I feel like I'm always wading above water.
Right. It's so interesting that you're saying that those disciplines, even though you would think from the outside that they're all kind of interlinked, that you're
Mhm.
having to use different brains. So, for example, if you're approaching a violin gig, how would you approach that differently to if you were working on your artist project? Because
Of course.
you'd think it's all music, but obviously
Mhm.
it's different.
It is. So I think the difference primarily is when I'm doing strings for someone, there's already a groundwork. I usually am brought in like when the song is 90% finished.
Mm.
So when I do come in, there's already, like a framework that I work in, and I try to fit into a box that already exists, right? So that's very different from me starting something completely from scratch and like figuring out what kind of box I even want to make. So I
Mhm.
would say it's a lot more thinking when you're starting something from scratch as opposed to coming in and like being like the sprinkles to the end of a cake.
Right. When you are adding those sprinkles in, do you like the fact that you've already got that framework in place and you just have to sprinkle?
Yes,
Oh, you do like that?
it's a lot less thinking, to be honest with you. And not that I'm lazy, but I gotta love some less thinking. So I do really like it, and I think there's a lot less pressure when something isn't yours.
Right.
It doesn't feel like life or death, and you don't, place as much pressure on yourself on how to make the best thing that represents the best you, because
Yeah.
ultimately you're going to be like a small feature of someone else's thing as opposed to like the primary soul of something.
Right. But those strings can add so much, right?
Oh
They can,
yeah, definitely.
yeah.
Definitely.
I mean, it's such a, I mean, I'd like to talk to you more about your artistry and as well as your violin work, but just to go back to the beginning a little bit in terms of how it all started. And I think I read a piece with you where you were saying that in some ways you owe your violin career to a friend in kindergarten who taught you how to tie your shoelaces. Is that
I mean, I don't know if I owe her. She wasn't very nice to me, but she tied my shoe when I was 6, and then she played violin, so I wanted to copy her, and then I started playing violin, And then I got better than her, and then she didn't like me so much. So I guess I owe her to the start of like, being interested in music for sure.
Yeah. Was it an immediate connection when you started playing violin? Did you feel an immediate connection with the instrument and music?
I don't think I did, to be quite honest with you. I think I was so young. I'm trying to even remember. I was 6 years old. Um, I remember that I wasn't as in love with it as I thought I should be. Like, I think right around when I was like applying to colleges and stuff, I was just like, I feel like if this is going to be my main thing, that I need to be obsessed with it. And I wasn't at all.
Hmm.
So I felt like a fraud almost. But then there was this one performance that I did of Mahler 9 in Vienna during a tour. And it just completely changed my relationship with music. I just really felt so connected to this piece. And I was like, this is what I'm supposed to do. So I did have this like turning point right around when I was like 16 or 17.
Right. Why do you think that piece in particular?
Oh man, I mean, Mahler is my favorite composer of all time. He's like a really tortured dude. Had like a lot of mental health issues and a lot of bad shit happened to his life, and you can really hear it. You can hear his instability in the music, and I feel like, also because I am unstable, I can really relate to it.
So that was 16 that you had that revelation. The 10 years leading up to that, between starting to pick up the instrument at 6 to then having that revelation at 16, because you obviously pursued it really seriously in that 10-year period to get to the point
Hmm.
where you were traveling around the world.
Hmm.
Was there an element of you throughout that period that was really having to force yourself, even though you were clearly good at it? Yeah, right.
Definitely. It was one of those things like I would say I was one of the people that didn't have to practice that much. So I kind of just like had something, you
Mm,
know? And meanwhile, like my consistency might not have been key, but there was something about, the soul of how I played that was always felt like this like special thing,
okay.
according to my teachers at least. And so, when other people were slaving away and they played, you can really hear how much they've practiced and how consistent they are, but you can't really feel it. And I think it was the exact opposite for me, where it's like you could hear my mistakes, but you could feel it.
Yeah.
Um, and so I just knew that I had this thing, but I also knew that a big part of me was doing it for college, so I could get into college. I also, at that point, I had spent so much time investing into violin that I didn't really know what else I would be good at.
Mm.
So I just kind of went with it. Yeah.
Okay. Was pop music in your atmosphere, like in your world at all?
No, not at all. Not until I was like 20. After I went to school, when I moved to LA for school, so I ended up going to UCLA, and I pursued a double degree in music and also international relations. And that's when I was getting calls for gigs that had nothing to do with classical music, and I had only really come from a classical music background. So I was like, oh my God, I can do something else that's not so high pressure and really rigid. It's a really rigid type of lifestyle where there's really only like three career options. You can, go into an orchestra. I don't know if you and I discussed this before, but you can either go into an orchestra and wait for someone to die. Everyone in orchestra has tenure, so you literally have to wait till someone dies.
Yeah.
Or lock yourself in a room for 9 hours a day and become a soloist. Or maybe you try to become part of a chamber group. And so all three are really high intensity, high pressure, career paths that require, really giving up a big part of your life, like your social life, your personality, I think, in a lot of ways. And you're just sitting there, kind of like, how a pro athlete does. You
Mm.
bury your head and you wake up every morning at 6 a.m., hit the gym, that kind of thing. But I always felt like a little more well-rounded than that, and I did really care about, how I was feeling as a human being, and I wanted to explore like my relationships, my friendships, everything, experiences. So I knew that none of those three paths were really going to fit me and keep me happy. So when I started getting these calls for pop, I was like, oh, like this is an alternative I didn't even consider before.
Right.
That being said, it does have its drawbacks because, of course, the issue is, you start playing a little more accessible music, easier music, and then how good you were does go down a little bit. You get a little rusty. You aren't able to play the crazy fast notes really quickly.
Mm.
So it is like, a taking a taking a give
Right.
kind of
So
situation. Yeah.
did you have to make a big adaptation then to when these pop calls started coming in? This is a world that you knew nothing about. Did you have to carry yourself in a different way, or act, or just sort of observe how to act in this world?
Yeah, definitely. I would say like the classical world is really an unhealthy, toxic environment where everyone is competing against each other. And, it's kind of bred this way because you're going into audition rooms one after the other, all, warming up in the same place. It really creates this competitive, almost hostile environment. Like I had a friend that went to Juilliard and she was a pianist, and someone had put razor blades in the piano keys before
Oh
a
my,
competition. It's really intense. So it really breeds this hostile, toxic environment. And so I never felt like I fit with that because I'm kind of goofy. I like to keep it low key and easygoing. And so, if anything, I think I felt like, oh, like I can just be me and I
right.
can, embrace the parts of myself that I felt were never appropriate in those really formal settings.
Hmm.
And yeah, I didn't feel like I had to adapt. I think if anything, I had to, be a little more like aware socially of like when it was appropriate to say anything, when it was appropriate to not say anything, just and I think that happens like as we get older, just in general, right? Not just in music, but just being
Sure.
aware of your social surroundings and reading the room. And so I think I got a really good idea of how to read the room once I started doing these sessions because these are really, famous people that initially I was like, oh my God, I can't even I'm in a room with this person. That's crazy, right? So it's like almost a part of you can't even be yourself initially. But the more and more you do it, the more you're just like, okay, like these are people and I just have to kind of feel it out and
Yeah.
see what they're up for. Throw little feelers in there and then judge from there how you can react. So I think it was a good learning curve socially for me in that way.
Ah, okay. And was Jason Derulo, was he the first pop kind of credit at that point, or?
I think he might have been actually. I'm trying to remember. Oof. I think it was. I think I did a video with him, Kiki Palmer, and a guy named Max. It's like all capital letters Max. And I did a video shoot for them, and that was like my first gig. And I was like at the YouTube space, and I was like, oh my God, I've been listening to this guy forever. Like it's crazy, I'm in here.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, you're really quiet at first because you want to know like, is the person friendly? Is the person doesn't want to be spoken to at all? Like what's really, and it changes based on artist, right? And whoever their team is, you're gonna get totally different kinds of people. You're gonna get outgoing people, you're gonna get like business only kind of people, and you just kind of have to gauge as you go in.
Yeah, absolutely. There's just one other credit from back at that time, which I wanted to ask you about, which is, did you work with Hans Zimmer did you do something with Hans Zimmer as well back then?
I had a non-disclosure agreement, I'm afraid.
Oh, okay, cool.
I tried to get it wiped from all my other interviews because I did get in a little bit of trouble,
Got
but
it. Fair enough.
yeah.
So at what point then do you then decide to make the jump? You finish at UCLA, you're going to stay in LA, and presumably try and pursue music full time, and perhaps more in the pop realm than in the classical realm. What is that period like where you leave university and you're out there in the world now? Because you've got to
Hmm.
make the connections. Were you starting from scratch?
I was, and initially, actually, I didn't even go full time. I was afraid that I wouldn't be able to financially support myself. I was, on my own at that point, and I wasn't even from LA, so there was nowhere for me to stay while I figured this out. I kind of had to get a job. So I actually worked in philanthropic consulting for 2 years. Like I had a 9 to 5,
Yeah,
and that whole time I remember how unhappy I was because I was doing work that I didn't, not that I didn't care for. That makes me sound like a bad person, but I was doing a lot of paper pushing and something that I thought I'd be like a bigger part of, like a bigger cause. And it was very rigid. I had to be there at 9. I had a 30-minute lunch break. And I had to be done at 5. You go home, there's traffic, you hit the gym, you make dinner, and that's your day, you know?
right.
So I found that I was getting really exhausted because I was still trying to pursue music, just not in a full time way. And I ended up being in a position where like I had no energy, and I was focused so much on trying to survive in very expensive LA that I almost forgot the purpose I was even trying to survive there for.
Yeah.
So there came a point, so I was working at this job. I got it like 3 months after I graduated. I was working at this job for 2 years, and I was so unhappy. I was like, just do it. You're going to be dirt broke for a second, like really dirt broke. You might not even be able to afford food, but you have to do it now.
Right.
So I quit my job and I started teaching, full-time teaching, um, at schools, and having a really hard time. I remember I'd go to the supermarket and, gaze at the fresh juice, squeezed juices aisle and be like, that's $7. I can't get that. But one day, you know, and having a hard time. I wouldn't fill my tank up fully. I had a dog and I wasn't able to always get her the proper medical attention. And yeah, just really on a really tight budget. But I was like, this is what I want to do, and I want to start building in this way. So what happened is that once I started teaching, I had a little more free space, like during the day, right, to do other things. And so I would get calls for different kinds of gigs, and I took everything, even the stuff that didn't pay. I was like, this is the time I have to build.
Mm.
And so I would be doing ridiculous gigs. Like, I think I went down to San Diego for a 3 hour gig for $75. That's ridiculous. That's like your gas. It won't even cover your gas at this gas economy right now. So I was doing a lot of that, and there was a point where I was like, did I just like switch out for a different hell? I just have like freer hours. But then I started getting more into a rhythm. I linked up with this guy named Johan. Johan is a really good friend of mine, and he is an artist as well. But he is like the Yale composer genius dude, you know. And it's funny because our dynamic is very like, he walks in, he's quiet, a little just suspect, and then I'll come in and be like, "What's up, guys?" So it's a really fun pairing. But he started calling me. I remember this was like the first. I had gotten broken up with this day. I remember so clearly. I was like, my life is a mess. I hate everything. And then like 3 hours later, I felt like it was a sign. I don't believe in like God. I believe in like the universe, and maybe there's a higher being or whatever. But I was just like, something is aligning, because 3 hours after I broke up with this guy, I got a call to be in my first major session, which was with Mike Dean, with designer, and Johan.
Right.
And I remember just driving down, just stoked and amped, and listening to electronic music, like just going 90 on the highway, just like, yes. And I went, and like, I had no idea what to expect, right? Because all these names, but you're never really in the presence of greatness and like that. So I went, and it was like, you realize they're normal people. They're just hanging out. They're just making music. And, probably by like hour 2, I was feeling more comfortable. Like I could be myself. I started cracking jokes. I'll never forget, like, I really had some cojones, because Mike Dean was smoking a blunt, and he started coughing a little, and I was like, I remember my first time. Oh my God, I was just really feeling myself, and hoping the joke would land. And yeah, it was really good, and it was a good experience, and designer really liked the strings that Johan had wrote. And that was like when it really, really started going. So after that, I think I, established to Johan that I was a reliable person. They could count on me to come on time. They could count on me to be in the room. He could count on me for, a multitude of things, to know my place as well, for when not to overstep. There's a lot of politics that happens in these rooms too, that I think you have to be aware of. And I quickly understood like how best to play my role. So yeah, he started calling me for one thing and the other thing and the other thing. And then I was lucky enough, I became his gal. And
Right.
so everything that he needed, like, he would write it and I would come in. And so we would think of it as like, he's the Batman to my Robin, really, and like, you just tell me where to shoot, kind of thing.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Then
And then
before
so
you
I
go
say it
on,
again.
go on. There you
Oh,
go.
no. It's okay.
Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt. I was just going to say that before you get to that point, just lastly on those months, I guess, as you were trying to get a foothold in LA,
Yeah.
what how did you get in the mental space that you could just push everything to one side and just stay focused and go, I'm not going home. I'm stay in LA. I'm still going to do this. How do you get into that headspace where you can just keep pushing forward?
I didn't think I really had a choice, because my parents and I at the time, like, I did not want to go back home to Massachusetts. Like, they're really good people, but like, I live better away from them.
Mm.
And I think I realized that, like, in order for me to like get my independence and get the respect from them for what I was doing, like, I really had to stand on my own feet.
Mm.
And it almost felt like I didn't really have like any other option. I had to either survive or there's like going home just like wasn't even in my head like as a back thing to fall on. And then soon enough they moved out of the country, so I really had, it was just like I got to figure it out. I have nowhere to go if this doesn't work out. So I lost my security blanket pretty quick in the game, I would say, financially. Like when I was 19, I think I started being on my own when I was like 18 or 19,
Yeah.
as soon as I hit school. And so it's kind of like you got to make it work. um, and it was hard. I mean, I would never go back to that time. There are times that I would be like looking outside of my balcony and be like, I don't know if I can. I
Right.
feel so drained. I feel depressed. I feel alone. And I'm sad. And like, I don't know if I'm doing the right thing. And especially like when you see your other friends and colleagues like really making career strides or going to the secondary level of education, and you're just like, am I a fool? Am I just like hitting this pipe dream and like thinking that it's gonna work? um so there were a lot of moments of doubt. I mean, there's still moments of doubt even to this day. Like, I think
Mm.
that's the fine line that you always have to walk between feeling like you're the shit and feeling like you're a piece of shit. And just ensuring that you stay humble but stay focused.
Yeah.
And like always try to push yourself, to challenge yourself. You're always learning. um so yeah, I mean, I don't think that's something that ever leaves until you like make it and like you're Drake level. I think until
Right.
then, I have a couple of friends who are like really high level artists that still are just like, I want to quit. So
Right. And
yeah.
I guess the important lesson, kind of tying into what you just mentioned there, is to not compare yourself to others if you can.
If you
Because,
can. I mean, the industry doesn't do a great job of enforcing that, but I
right.
think you have to try your best, and you have to just think, this is my own path. And there's no point. Everyone does things on their own time. And you think of all the stories of, like, I think Oprah was really old when she made it, and a bunch of people were really like on the older end when they really broke out. And so just all you can do, I think, is just try your best every day.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you start getting the platinum and the gold plaques coming in for your work with Lil Nas, Big Sean, and Taylor Taylor, does that everything you went through, does it make those moments all the sweeter? Do you think? Did you take time to actually go, wow, look at this?
I think, like, in a sense, yes. You know, I'm happy that there's something that I can show. That's this undeniable thing where I'm just like, I'm doing it, right? But that being said, there's also, a lot of those plaques and stuff like that is just industry BS, just showing off. And so I'm also aware of that, you know. So I think it's just like a balance act between yourself, where you remember, like, okay, this shows that I did something, but you're like nowhere close. You don't even get comfortable. Like, you still have a lot to do, and you're nowhere close to where you need to be.
Right. So how important is your artist work then as Yaz or Yaz? I'm not sure. Is it Yaz or Yaz? Like, how would you pronounce my
Yeah,
yes?
just Yaz, just very
Yaz. Okay.
American Yaz. Yeah.
Yes.
Um,
To
I would
getting to
say,
get to, how important then is your artist work to that? Because you released some wonderful EPs last year.
mhm,
That selection
mhm.
of like the color coded EPs, I guess you could call them. Is that ideally where you would like to focus more so?
I would say, it's tough because being an artist is a whole nother thing. And I don't know that I knew that when I started. I was just like, I love music. I know this is what I want to do. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I'm a video director and a content creator and a creative director, like all these things that I don't feel like I'm good at all. And not that I necessarily even signed up for. So I was just like, all right, I guess this is coming with the territory and I have to do it. And I don't think I expected it. That being said, yes, I'm up for the challenge. And I do find that I'm most happy when I'm creating my own work because I
Right.
feel like there's this tangible thing that exists that it represents me.
Mm.
And, something that I put together that can, show someone like this is who I am. I think I'm still in the process of like really honing in on like the sound. I think one of the things about being a musician first is that you are able to do a lot, and that can be a positive and a negative because then your interests vary a little too much because you get bored by one thing a little too quickly. So it's hard to brand, like my interests are everywhere. I love R&B, I love ballads, I love like dark pop, like, but as an artist it doesn't really work that way. And that's I think what I came to realize after I put out the color compilation last year is that like yes, I can do all kinds of stuff, but like you can't be remembered as a person that does all kinds of stuff. I really was hoping that I could make that my brand, but I'm realizing like as I understand human brain a little more, like it's not easy for someone to grasp onto that idea. And that was a lot of the feedback that I received from, a lot of labels, and they're like, all of it's really good, but I don't understand how it comes together. So I think this is the year that I really think about like, how does it all come together? Where do I want to go? How
Mm.
do I bring all of those different aspects and mold it into one cohesive thing?
And how are you feeling about that challenge?
I mean, it never feels like I'm any closer. I will say that I'm still making music, a ton of music right now, and it's definitely starting to sound more cohesive in the sense that it's like, you know, I wouldn't have like different projects that would be like only R&B and only ballads or anything. I think I'm starting to melt them together. But I think it's one of those things I just have to keep at it and keep on doing it, and it'll become closer in time. I think I'm starting to finally get to the point. It's like I'm like being able to peer over the next stair of what I'm capable of, which is cool. What
Yeah.
I do love about, making music is that it's like always a learning curve, and you're never like, okay, I did it. It's like
Yeah.
once you've gone to this step, you are always like going up and up and up and seeing what you're capable of, seeing what you like. And like, as you grow older, your taste changes and gets refined and everything. So yeah.
And have all the incredible artists that you've worked with, have you ever not lent on them, but asked them for advice? Have they ever offered advice as to
Mm-hmm.
your
I,
music?
yes. So I wrote strings for Sinead Harnett, who I absolutely adore. She is such a wonderful, wonderful person, wonderful artist, just this bright, beaming soul of sunshine. And she is like an example of someone that's like still really like pushing through, like very in a really great place in her career. But, like it took a second for her to get there, and she really worked for it. And so I did send her the stuff, and I was like, I just get so bummed out sometimes. And she's like, this is everyone, we're all there, like whether we show it or not. And it did give me a sense of peace knowing that like, no one really has it figured out, and I'm not behind, and I need to stop thinking in that way, and I just need to literally just do the best I can every day, and that's all I can ask of myself.
That's such an important lesson. That's such a great way of thinking, but it's hard to get to that place
Oh
sometimes, right?
yeah, totally. I think especially like with my background, with the classical background, with my immigrant background, it's always just like you have to go like this. It has to be linear, it has to be quick. I'm also like an impatient person in general, I think, So it's no surprise that I picked a career path that would emphasize a lot of the things that I struggle at, you know.
Right, right.
So yeah.
So I was just going to say, Yasmeen, that was you've been so generous with your time. So thank you so much for
Oh
chatting.
yeah, no, absolutely.
Really appreciate all your time, particularly when you're on holiday
Oh
and
yeah.
hear the new music that once you figure out what you're going to do next, can't wait to hear it. So
Hmm.
thank you again for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, and I will talk to you later, Rod. Cheers.
Bye bye.